So outside of the 4 RoboCop movies, the character is also featured in 4 TV series, all of which equals about 40 hours of material, and I watched every last one of them for my animation, The Evolution of RoboCop, which can be seen over on Adobe Animate. Now, most people, even fans of RoboCop, will tell you that anything after the first or second movie probably isn't worth watching, although the remake does have its defenders. Now, most of them probably haven't watched the 4 TV series, so today I want to go through them all and let you know if any of them are worth watching. So let's talk about that now. Starting with the original animated series from 1988, which came out a year after the original film, which should probably worry you a little bit, as animated productions often have a long build-up period before release, but this was basically released a year after the original RoboCop finished its theatrical run. It more or less ignores the events of the movie, although it does borrow some elements and characters, and Lewis returns but is turned into a more useless character and now has weird, romantic feelings for RoboCop. The old man and Sergeant Reed also appear, and Clarence Boddicker, the guy who killed RoboCop in the first film, only to be killed himself, is also back for an episode where RoboCop has to hunt him down again, and instead of killing him, he just arrests him. Also, interestingly, there's only 12 episodes of the series instead of the usual 13 episodes an animated series would get for its first season. This is because Marvel, the studio that developed the series, put the budget from the final episode into making a failed X-Men pilot, so it's pretty telling that a studio didn't even want to finish the first season. With that said, it's still somewhat interesting to watch, even if it's not canon. The animation isn't horrible, and its more science fiction-y setting will at least differentiate it enough from the movie series. The next TV series to be greenlit was RoboCop the Series, which supposedly takes place after the original film, despite it coming out a year after RoboCop 3 and being more in tone with that film, as it never really goes beyond a PG-13 feeling, and even often feels more like a G-rated show. The pilot episodes actually adapted from a discarded RoboCop 2 script, and some critics at the time said it was better than the RoboCop 2 that we got, which I wholeheartedly disagree with. And unlike the animated series, a lot of the names had to be changed for the live action show. So Sergeant Reed became Sergeant Parks, and Lewis became Lisa Madigan, the old man became the chairman, but their roles stayed basically the same. The company OCP itself is presented more as ignorant and dumb, instead of evil as they appear in RoboCop 2 and 3, and all the violence has been toned way down. But once you get used to that, the show is actually somewhat watchable. The characters grow on you, and Richard Eden does a pretty good job in the RoboCop role. It was also filmed in Toronto, where I used to live, so it's nice to spot a landmark or street I know when I'm watching it. Like the animated series, this wasn't picked up for a second season, although the season final does wrap up some of the plot lines, so it feels almost complete. The next RoboCop TV series was the second animated show, Alpha Commando. This one was made in 1998, 10 years after the first animated show, and somehow feels even more childish in its execution. This is probably because RoboCop almost never shoots anyone, even with his lasers. He almost always has another non-lethal force or just extends his arms and picks people up. It's as if he is like Inspector Gadget or something. This series also has an evil shadow corporation that serves as the series' main antagonist, and for the most part they come across as pretty generic. RoboCop himself is given a huge redesign and feels almost nothing like himself. The show takes place 10 years after the events of the movie series, and RoboCop has been cryogenically frozen, sort of like Futurama. But he's booted back up and given a new female partner, and the first thing he says to her is, "Who's the babe?" It's like they either didn't understand who RoboCop is, or they just didn't really care. They also ignore Ann Lewis as a character, although if this does take place after 3, she would be dead already. But it does feature Sergeant Reed, who is played by the same actor as the Sergeant from the original live-action TV series from 1994. This series also takes place in a much more advanced society than seen before, and even though it takes place 10 years in the future, Murphy's family for some reason hasn't aged a day compared to the flashbacks seen in this show. All in all, this show came and went. Even though it got 40 episodes, it only lasted one season. And to be frank, there's much better animated shows to revisit from this time, like the Godzilla series or the Men in Black series, so you can probably skip this one altogether. So we finally get to the last RoboCop series, RoboCop Prime Directives, which came out in 2001 and was a 4-episode mini-series. This is another live-action series, which may or may not take place after the third movie, but it sort of ignores most of RoboCop's backstory, We do see flashbacks of Murphy at his original police station before he was transferred at the beginning of the first movie, and if you missed the violence of the first 2 films, this show will scratch that itch, but it sometimes uses cheap TV CGI, and in the early 2000s at that, so it just looks pretty awful. Another thing that this TV series has working against it is the actor who plays Murphy. He just sort of looks like a big baby in the suit. They used a modified suit made for Peter Weller, but Paige Fletcher, who played Murphy here, is probably half a foot shorter than Weller, I'd guess, and looks like he is just swimming in the suit. It doesn't help that the other RoboCop model he fights against is played by a much taller actor, making him look even shorter. This series does sort of return to the Western revenge themes of the original movie. The soundtrack even sounds like a Western score, but the execution is extremely lacking. Fun fact here though, it too was filmed in Toronto, and so many times I spotted places where I used to work, or where I used to go, but other than that I found the show to be a pretty boring slog fest. Although at least it tells a complete story in its 4 episodes, so it does have that going for it. So all in all, the best place to start if you want more RoboCop after the movies is probably the original RoboCop TV series from 1994. It's not perfect, but it's at least watchable and does grow on you. Then if you want to check out the 1988 anime show, it's an interesting experiment and probably the quickest one to watch of all these choices. If you're feeling adventurous, you can then check out Prime Directives, but its execution is lacking. Although I would say to avoid Alpha Commando at all costs. It's way too long and misses the mark way too many times. So, thank you guys for watching. Have you seen any of these TV series? If so, what are your thoughts? And special shout out to the patrons, especially Thomas Friend and 53XY83457. Check out the evolution of RoboCop animation linked in the description, and I'll tell you something later.